the alternative paradigm of development. That if under the existing development pattern all these problems are there, then what kind of alternative development pattern should be there, which can, and under that kind of alternative development paradigm, we are able to sort out most of the problems which are being experienced, whether it is extreme poverty, whether it is extreme inequality, whether it is environmental ruin. So naturally over a period of time I also had a vision of what kind of alternative pattern there should be. And one very important finding that I want to share with you is that supposing climate change was not there, then there was a certain kind of alternative paradigm of development I had in mind, both from my library research as well as from visiting villages and talking to farmers and activists. So I formed a certain thinking about, without climate change being there, that this should be the alternative paradigm of development. And the great discovery of my professional life is that with climate change exactly the same thing happens. You see, it is not that the alternative development that we require is something very different from what, maybe there has to be some different in emphasis. Because in my earlier scheme of things also I was thinking that renewable sources of energy are very important. But now in the context of climate change, maybe I'll give it more importance than I otherwise would have. But a lot of things which I thought otherwise, without climate change being there, that this is very important for sorting out various problems, whether it is agriculture problems or other problems. These would be not only equally relevant, but even more relevant in times of climate change. To give just one example, let us say that I had a strong feeling that compared to the kind of development, agriculture development strategy that the government is promoting, what they like to call the green revolution type of farming, I firmly believe that we need to move towards organic farming, low-cost farming, farming based on local resources. It is not that kind of an organic farming which is very expensive, but it is something which has to be rooted in the reality of India's small farmers. It has to be low-cost farming. At the same time, it has to be based on local resources, local rural resources also. So this was very important for me, but in times of climate change, it is even more important. I realized earlier that opposition to GM crops is very important. Because of climate change, it is even more important. Protection of traditional seeds, local seeds, biodiversity is very important even otherwise. Because of climate change, its importance further increases. So it is not that in times of climate change, we are going to have some, in terms of alternative development thinking, we are going to have to invent something new. It is basically that kind of things only. Basically, the basic message is that it should be equality based, it should have a real concern for the weaker sections, and should be ecologically protective. And that, I think, priority remains in these times also. And another very important thing which I feel which gets neglected all the time is that while we are talking of renewable energy, and to some extent we are also talking of sustainable farming practices, but what climate change means in terms of equality is not being. I think, and this failure to relate equality-based changes, for example, the neglected question of land reforms, there has been a big failure to relate equality-based changes to the new challenge of climate change. And I think this has been a big missing dimension of the entire debate. That whenever you discuss climate change, you discuss a whole lot of issues, but you don't discuss the need for a more equality-based rural development model. Whereas I firmly believe that if equality was important earlier, basically we have always said that samta or sadgi, there should be equality and simplicity, because sadgi is a word which basically stands for environmental protection also, for a less consumerist development model, which is also necessary for environment protection, because without sadgi, generally environment protection would not be possible. Now this, because of the needs of climate change, because of the I mean, certainly fighting climate change means reduction of fossil fuels. But supposing you emphasize only reduction of fossil fuels, but you do nothing about consumerism. If overall consumerism goes on increasing, then even reduction of fossil, supposing you have technologies which for producing any set of goods make it possible to reduce fossil fuels, but overall basket of goods goes on increasing. Overall consumerism goes on increasing, then again, basically the implications in terms of climate change would be the same. So, in terms of rural development, what I feel very strongly is that we certainly need more resources for farming, one thing, in budgetary terms. And so much has been talked about a special environment fund, $100 billion, and if that had taken place in India, would have probably got a share, 1/5 of that or something like that. What I certainly believe is that whenever I go to rural areas, I feel strongly that whatever budgetary resources are coming for farmers, for farm workers and for the weaker sections are certainly much less than what is needed. And in times of climate change, one thing is certain that you need to increase budgetary resources for rural areas much more. It is not a question of 10% or 20% increase, it is a question of increasing it by several times, I feel, for rural areas as well as for the weaker sections. But then how that money will be spent is equally important. Because the existing development strategies are so distorted that what is actually done for farmers is actually reaching agribusiness. In the name of rural poor, money is sanctioned. In the name of farmers, it is sanctioned, but in various ways it reaches the corrupt people, it reaches the existing dominant classes, or it reaches big agribusiness companies. So I think all that needs to change really. And we, first of all, budgetary resources need to increase, and secondly, how this will be spent. And above all, we need to have an alternative paradigm of rural development, which will be based on more equality, which will be based on ecologically protective policies in all respects, which would be, and it has to be very democratic model, where people's voices are actually heard. And I think efforts like Jalshah's writers based in villages are also a small effort in that direction of decentralization. I'll stop.
Thank you. Thank you, Bharatji. Actually, you done it in with 1 minute spare. You spared 1 minute from the 10 minutes allocated. Thank you. I think you touched most of the key issues, including the key issue of consumption. Reducing the consumption is key. I wish these bottles were not here, it were just glasses instead of this. This is also consumption. Increasing the footprint. So, can I now invite?
I think, every time, one of the reasons why we are talking about rural communities and their vulnerability is because of their vulnerability. And not necessarily it's the climate change that is the main reason or the only reason why the rural is the poor and is the vulnerable. Climate change, of course, has helped in peaking their vulnerability because in terms of their dependence that we're talking about, in terms of their day-to-day operations, their livelihood, their life, their connection and their relationship with nature, natural resources. But unless and until we actually look at what you were saying, that if we don't look at other aspects of agrarian economy, agrarian culture, or that farmer or the rural community, it's very, very difficult to only say or only address issues of climate change and be able to resolve the problem. The other is that, when we use the word, every time right now in the last couple of years, of course, internationally there's conversation around mitigation and adaptation when we talk about climate change in most of the discourses. And then today also when we're saying that how do rural communities cope or adjust with the situation. If you really look inward, deep into the kind of crisis that exists on the ground, and then you expect them to cope and adjust, it is a little violent an expectation, because it's very, very difficult for them to cope and adjust, because it's an extreme situation that they are living in. We primarily mean that we will continue our run. As you said, the main discourse, the narrative that we currently have of development, of growth, of India rising, India shining, India singing, India dancing. And they should adjust. If they need to be part of this party, they need to adjust or cope with the situation, because if you have to dance and if you have to grow, and then people will have to sacrifice, and you're the one who has to sacrifice the most. So a lot of this narrative somewhere gets linked to that entire saying of greater common good, and the poorest of the poor will have to actually compromise or cope or adjust in this larger narrative of greater common good. Which, therefore, there's a problem. I think there needs to be a conversation of resistance rather than adjustment, which is also happening. I'm not saying that that's not happening in various parts of the country. I think, as people say, as I think Arundhati Roy has written about it, that how can Hungary go on a hunger strike? So therefore, when we're talking about the most vulnerable communities right now, the crisis that they are in because of climate change, it's so extreme that it's not about, well, let's Google Maps says this route, we can go the other route because that's shorter to reach to that destination of better life or less vulnerability in that sense. The other thing is that I think when we talk about rural communities, are we talking about rural communities who live in rural areas? Or are we talking about rural communities who are living in urban areas as well? Because in this, when climate change and the impact of climate change, a larger impact of this new economic model that we have on rural community, it leads and manufactures urban poor out of the rural poor. And that urban poor is more vulnerable than the rural poor. So when we talk about rural communities, we are not necessarily only talking about rural communities who still live in rural spaces and are necessarily dependent on agriculture. The worst are people, in fact, there are several studies that's been conducted which says that the urban poor and his or her vulnerability is worse, because if you look at someone last 2 years and this year as well, when we talk about air quality, for example, deteriorating air quality, the most who will suffer because of the deteriorated air quality would be people who are living on the streets of Delhi. Will be people who actually are living on the slums. At the end of the day, if the Yamuna is dead today or is dying further, and in that film people were talking about how the rivers are getting toxic, it's you and I perhaps can go and install a water purifier, but it's the poorest and of the poor, people who have actually migrated from smaller towns or smaller villages because of bad agriculture or several reasons. They've been pushed to urban communities living in vulnerable situations, and they drink that water from the river. So the crisis and vulnerability due to climate change plus many other issues on rural communities is not just in rural community but also in urban spaces, and I think that's an important conversation to be had, because that is where these are also spaces which are spaces for better governance, and that's where be it urban housing, public health, public ecology, all of that has a major impact on the rural poor who is now pushed to become the urban poor in that sense. One more point, last point that I want to make, and then perhaps we'll take some more when we discuss. I think it's important right now the way things are in our country. If you look at the numbers of, and we're talking about extreme statistics of farmer suicides only. We're not talking about poverty numbers. We're talking about suicide numbers. All of that. This is also not good from a civic rest or unrest point of view. We're actually manufacturing a country, a divided nation, which is not healthy, not just for them, but also that narrative, that mainstream narrative of privatization, globalization, even that bus, that bogie, that express train will also not be able to go very far if these concerns are not addressed, because it is actually creating violent opposition in several communities. And conversation about the rural or conversation about the poor have to be had with the poor. A lot of the conversation about the poor is happening by the rich, and still in many quarters. As in, I'm not talking today. Of course, we're discussing because a lot of work is with. As in, I'm not. It's not a commentary on any of us in that sense. But that conversation is to be had, and that is also somewhere that space is diminishing. That space of they're almost becoming voiceless day by day, and this on behalf conversation needs to be a little neutralized, a little more balanced, and they need to come to the mainstream and put forth their resistance, their representation, and their voice. Climate change, unfortunately, it's going to stay. It's not getting any better. 1 degree, 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees, we can go somewhere here or there. Most of the cities today, most of the spaces that we have in our country, they are going through extreme environmental crisis, be it related to water, related to air. Delhi, for example, as in right now we just looked at the situation as I was talking about air quality. We've lost around 80,000 hectares of, around 30,000 hectares of forest cover in the last 10 years in Delhi. We've added 80,000 hectares of concrete in Delhi NCR in the last 10, 12 years. Now, of course, as in there could be a conversation around land acquisition and farming and environment and everything else that is there. And added to that is the vulnerable air quality that we're talking about. From an urban space point of view, my last comment, I was doing a workshop a couple of months ago with some 30, 35 school students, and we were having a conversation that all of us live next to a river basin. These students were from different parts of the country. We said, why don't you group yourself based on the river basin that you belong to? So there was someone from Banaras, he made a small Ganga group. There was someone from Bombay who made a Meethi River group. There's this girl who used to be very, very quiet in my class, usually used to not speak. So I do some bit of work with young people in several schools of Delhi. She walks up to me and says, sir, I don't know which river basin do I belong to. I think I belong to the tap water basin. And interestingly, almost out of 40 people, almost 50 to 60% of the class actually went and joined her group. They all did not know which river did they belong to or which river basin did they belong to. They all thought that their river was the tap water. And tap water basin or the Syntex basin or the Bisleri basin, unless that narrative is hit tight, that narrative of talking for the poorest of the poor, and mostly poorest of the poor are farmers and women and Dalits and Muslim, will not change in our country.
Thank you, Vimalendu. You also have finished before your time. And I think a couple of points he has made is that rural areas are already in crisis. And the climate change is only multiplying that crisis. So that's very key important issue. And of course that whole crisis is also leading to manufacturing of the urban poor, as he puts it. So, and how they then in turn suffer. So these are the two key issues among many other issues. So now I'll hand it over to Nagaraj for his presentation.
Yeah, my name is Nagaraj and I'm a member of India Climate Justice. I also sort of sometimes speak in colleges quite often, and as part of that I came out with some basic literature for students mainly, but also media people and activists and so on, which is recently updated and translated to Hindi. Unfortunately I only have one this copy here, but if anyone is interested in multiple copies, please contact me, and there's a very basic sort of literature for students mainly and also media people. I'm very much in agreement with what Bharatji and Vimalendu said, particularly sort of focusing on questions of equality, questions of consumption, and bringing in the question of rural and urban and the connection between the two, and also particularly climate change impacts in urban areas, which sometimes tend to be underplayed, whether it is questions of heat stress, on the way in which women's diets get affected when agricultural prices go up, questions of droughts and floods which are seen in greater frequency, like in Chennai or in Kashmir or in Uttarakhand and so on. To those broad points that they have made earlier, I just had one, which is this. To me, central to the problem of climate change and global warming is the logic of industrial capitalism. And that logic is one of growth. It's of accumulation. it's for profit. And somewhere I feel, I've been through many discussions where it sort of doesn't come up in the in meetings and so on. So just to be one instance before I go more closer to the topic is this. The last 40 years, for instance, we'll take every 1% rise in GDP. I'm not talking worldwide. For every 1% rise in GDP, there's been a 0.4% rise in carbon emissions. You see, and there's a very direct kind of correlation. That interestingly has changed in the last 3 years. There seems to be some kind of apparent flattening out. But it's a connection that I want to make, that it's very central, it's like an umbilical connection, that's one. The other interesting thing that's happened in the last 2-3 years is a sharp rise in temperatures. So when we raise the question about how can rural communities cope, the question is what are they coping with? Because when I began looking at climate change more closely 10 years ago, people talked about 0.8 degrees of average warming worldwide. All over the world, the earth had warmed by 0.8 degrees, about 7, 8, 10 years ago. Then it became 0.9 and it's 1. And now this year, 2016, which will be the third year in a row, the warmest ever year recorded. And this is something that has never happened before. Yeah, it's now reached 1.2. And the nature of warming is such that it sort of warms suddenly. One scientist called it like a staircase going up. It's not as if it's a sort of smooth slope, not like a ramp. It's like a staircase. Average temperatures suddenly shoot up. It happened in the mid-70s. Then they'll plateau for a while. They'll zigzag for a bit. And then suddenly they shot above 98. And then it kind of plateaued. And so on. And now again it's shooting up. And my hunch is that it's going to sort of stay in this range. So this is what rural communities in India have to cope with. So we take the crops, we take the water sources and so on. It's not what it was like 10 years ago. You see, it's very different. I mean, between 0.8 average and 1.2 average is a huge difference of warming. And my estimate is going to stay for a while and it'll probably shoot up again. That's one broad point. Getting back to the topic at hand about how can we cope, I'd rather indicate a few instances of how some communities are coping. And I can scarcely speak for such a wide and incredibly diverse country, but some instances I can see, for example, my own village, where my uncle lives and they live for 45-50 years and they grow up mainly on धान उगता है. तो वहाँ पे क्या होता है, पिछले कई साल से 5 या 6 बार ऐसे हुआ है कि कटाई के टाइम में जो है बारिश अचानक आती है. And initially they would tell me, because I go and visit there very frequently. This village is called Adve, and it's on the Karnataka coast between Mangalore and Udupi. And then they was basically there. What small farmers are doing is when they anticipate this coming, they sort of the katai happens earlier, or there's a crop damage which also affects the crop. There's 25% loss of yield, or there's fodder gets affected and so on. So that's one way in which the coping happens. I'm talking of instances of kinds of adaptation that may be taking place. The point is we can't assume that all of them may work. I'll later talk a bit about some adaptations that may not work, but see elsewhere further south, you go down say Kerala and other parts of Karnataka, coffee growers are being affected by unseasonal rains. You see, so rains are suddenly coming in November and December. And what they call is a particular term which I forget now, which is the blossom showers. Timing of that is changing, it's becoming more erratic. And that has prompted a shift from the Arabica variety of coffee to the Robusta. Because I'm told that the Robusta variety is kind of more resilient. It can deal with irrigation that Arabica cannot, and so on. It's happened both in Karnataka and in Kerala. In Karnataka, they're being impacted by a certain kind of Ketan, the stem borer, and so on. Elsewhere, I've heard of other ways in which people are coping. I went to the Sundarbans a while ago. In the Sundarbans, as one knows, sea level rise is one huge factor there. And also after Aila, there's a shift to saline-resistant varieties, rice varieties. For instance, one such I think my memory is it is called Dudeshwar. But there are a number of other, genetic varieties which are more saline-resistant. Some of which the communities there are sort of adopting. Some of which are being talked about and discussed by either NGOs or environmentalists who are sort of engaged in the question more deeply. In other places, I'm told that cropping patterns are changing. In places that I've heard of anecdotally in MP, people have changed the variety of the duration of the crops. Are adopting more sort of short duration crops so that to minimize the risk. Essentially, it's also a matter of risk minimization. See, so in different places, different kinds of things are sort of being adopted. The point also is that farmers are having to constantly cope. You see, there always was some amount of natural variation. That was always the case with monsoon or with temperatures and so on. But this kind of variation that we are now seeing, you see, where there's flooding suddenly, Balaji has written extensively about what it's been like in Bundelkhand in the last few years. You know, places which have suffered a long series of drought may suddenly face flooding. The kind of basically the variation is, which farmers have to cope with have gone up hugely. You see, so they can cope with some. I recently was in parts of Bhimtal and slightly higher, where people are saying that 20, 30 years ago they used to grow apples. Now, because it's not cold enough in winter to grow apples, they're being forced to change the crop itself. Now they may grow certain kind of cauliflower or something else and so on. So in different ways, different kind of adaptations are constantly happening. But secondly, this is my second point. Let's not assume that farmers can always cope. One is that rising temperature I talked about earlier. The other part is that there will be some events in which maybe people cannot cope. I mean, in Sundarbans, it's also the case that tens of thousands of people have been forced to leave. I mean, I met family after family who, you know, where they told us about their own relatives who had to sort of leave and move elsewhere, either to Kolkata or to Delhi or other places looking for work because, you know, there's been a constant erosion of lands taking place. In Bundelkhand itself, when we went a few years ago, we went there because Jansapta, in fact, reported that in a short period, maybe about a year, you know, several tens of lakhs of people have been forced to sort of leave. And that impact is very sort of, in a sense, it's hierarchical. It's felt more by poor women, it's felt more, in a sense, also by agricultural workers, and so on. So we talk about coping, I also think that one needs to then sort of stratify and say, who are we talking about? In my view, already poor women are the largest single social group being impacted by climate change. And that's partly because they do all kinds of work, whether it's inside the house or outside the house. Except for certain kinds of work which either for caste reasons or for reasons of patriarchy they are forbidden from doing. Other than that, women do everything. It will therefore naturally follow that they are the most impacted. The other kind of impacts are taking place, but where one cannot assume that people will cope. See? Now just go to the third point, there will be limitations of time, which is to talk also about ways in which rural communities, and here I don't mean just farmers, I also mean other kinds of communities or other livelihoods who live in rural areas or elsewhere, who are being impacted by climate change, which is two things. One is when other species are being impacted, and then that in turn has an impact, whether positive or negative, on livelihoods in those areas. And one such, as an example, for instance, along the eastern coast of India, there are two very, very important fish species, important both for nutrition and also for livelihood, particularly mackerel and bangda or aila as it's known, and sardines. These were never part of the eastern coast 25-30 years ago. The reason they have moved in there is because the ocean waters have gotten warmer. As they've gotten warmer, their range has sort of moved further north. Along the western coast, their range has moved from the Malabar sort of area coast. They've gone north, for a further north, 650 kilometers in the last 25-30 years. They're now almost in Gujarat. Along the eastern coast, that has influenced the way in which fishing communities have dealt with technology. Partly because of the tsunami, but also partly because of this. These new kind of fish that have entered their waters has necessitated a certain kind of different